I've broken it down into there's sort of three categories of our Church and Ministry Alliance members that may be impacted by Title IX. And let me break it down like this. The first category I would say is colleges, private religious colleges. We have a number of members of our program. Almost all of these across the board categorically are likely to be impacted generally by Title IX because of the fact of receiving federal financial assistance through student loans, the VA program, the Pell Grants, these types of things. It's pretty rare to find a college that's able to completely reject all federal funding in the college space. So that's the first category. The second category is K-12 schools. So Christian schools from preschool all the way through, secondary, middle school, secondary education. What we find is a lot of our members in this category, they do engage in some forms of federal funding from time to time, whether they realize it or not. And so, and we'll get in, I think, later on to talk about some kind of surprise forms of federal funding, but I'll just hit some high points here of things of schools that I've worked with that I'm aware they've engaged in these types of programs. One is the E-rates program that's administered by the FCC. Another common one is the meal funding programs. There's a variety of those administered by the USDA. So anything from the special milk program to the National School Lunch Program to the breakfast program and all the smaller programs in between. That can definitely implicate Title IX as well. Then you have sometimes some security, safety, school safety type of funding programs coming through the Department of Homeland Security, administered through FEMA sometimes. We need to carefully look at the terms and conditions on those types of fundings and grant programs to see if they implicate Title IX, and they often do. And then the last kind of broad category that we see commonly is coming from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act from the Department of Education itself. Now these are worth talking about for a brief minute because they function a little bit uniquely, and I think to the advantage of the religious schools that participate, because typically my understanding is they operate through a reimbursement type of mechanism so that the school itself is not directly receiving the funds, but the teacher that's receiving the funds for continuing education, or the student that's receiving some funds through a particular program. It's a reimbursement mechanism, usually through the state or a local agency. So on that category of funding, the general understanding is that does not constitute federal financial assistance for the purpose of triggering Title IX. So that's my second category. The third category, if you're familiar with our Church and Ministry Alliance program, we serve such a wide variety of ministries, from pregnancy resource centers to after-school tutoring programs to homeless shelters, everything in between. And so there are some kind of other types of ministries that may potentially trigger the definitional part of the Title IX statute in terms of are you running an education program or activity? That's the nexus of the question. And if you are, and there might be some fringe things that may or may not trigger that definition. If you're also receiving federal financial assistance, definitely talk to us about whether Title IX applies to you.